So, what is the story of your calling to ministry, and how has that path brought you to where you are today?
My calling may be similar to maybe some of the people that you've interviewed or even people that you've run across. I never felt like I had this one moment where I was called to go do something. I had a lot of moments that were like dominoes leading up to a point where I finally kind of caved in and just said, like, I got to do this. I do remember that moment, but what led me to that moment was people that were really instrumental in my life came up to me and spoke into me, and it wasn't like a prophetic word or anything, but they encouraged me to think about it and to consider ministry. And growing up in a house that was very ministry related, I always knew that I wanted to do something to help people and to love Jesus. And it wasn't necessarily, it didn't have to be ministry, but it could be. So I was always open to it. And then I realized what was really cool in high school is I wanted to be a historian, which was weird. It sounds like so academic. I wanted to be a historian, and then I was really good at English, so I was really good at writing papers, and I was really good at history because I could remember stories really well. And I realized later on, looking back on those moments, that God was using my passions for his purpose, and my passion was I love stories, and I love telling people stories and communicating them. And then that slowly evolved into I love to preach, and I was able to harness those talents and passions into like communicating the gospel. And there was a moment when I was in Florida at my grandma's like old person church, and I was sitting there with no expectation of anything. Like I didn't even want to be there. I was in Florida, and when you're on vacation, I don't feel like you have to go to church, but whatever. So I'm sitting there in the pew, and this young woman comes up to the platform, and she is a missionary from like Africa or something like that. And she tells some of these stories about what she'd been doing, what God had done through her life, and just things that she had seen. And it's funny because that was a moment where everything clicked. And I realized, wow, I can be in an old person church having no expectation, and God can still be pursuing me and my passions. And he harnessed them. And in that moment, I felt solidified that I need to pursue ministry. And it wasn't like God told me to do this, but I did feel like God nudged me towards ministry. So that was probably what led me to pursue Bible college, to pursue being a pastor, and I changed my major like 5 different times. Like I wanted to be a missionary, I wanted to be a pastor. Like at this point, I'm good just being in ministry. Like wherever you need me, I want to do it. I might not be the best in the nursery, and kids, I thought they like me. The older I get, I feel like the less they like me, but you know, so, yeah.
Cool. So, what is the most challenging aspect of leading your particular ministry, past or present?
The most challenging aspect of my current ministry. That's a good question. Probably one that I've worked through, and I still have to kind of work through every single time I'm doing ministry, is my ministry is very close to my age, and building respect and camaraderie between your congregation is a difficult thing and a difficult task to ask, because on one end I want to be people's friends and I want them to feel very comfortable with me. At the same time though, I'm called to lead and I'm called to shepherd, and sometimes that stick has to come out and I gotta do one of these to get the sheep back on the path. And those are moments that I shied away from early on, and maybe that was because I'm trying to figure out my place here at this church, and relationships, I was still new. The longer I'm here, the easier it's getting, although it's still difficult. And maybe that just comes with confidence in my role and confidence in myself. And also, like, relationships matter, and the depth of relationships is really important. So while I'm not about to go up to like some new guest and like tell them what, like, straight up what they need to hear, I do have more flexibility and freedom to do that with people who I've known since the beginning. And that has worked dividends in my ministry. It has eased stress off of me because I would usually keep those things like in pent up frustration. But now, and I'm sure as I continue to grow in ministry, I'm more of like a straight shooter. And like I'm happy-go-lucky and people think I'm goofy all the time, but I mean, when you're down in the office with me and I gotta say something, they'll listen. And that's important because you can't just be the goofball all the time. You have to have points of accountability, and that's, I think, really important in ministry. That was a challenge for me, and it still is, but I'm working through that as I'm getting more situated with my role.
Cool. How have you built and continue to build great leadership skills in yourself?
Well, leadership skills will differ from person to person. For me, what has helped me is watching and doing a lot of watching and listening to other people who I aspire to be as leaders. So, for instance, Pastor Cal, like our own pastor, he is someone who is very wise and he is very good with what to say to certain people. And I'm more of like a upfront, show them how you feel. Like, I don't have a poker face. Pastor Cal has been one that is very good with words, and that has helped me to become better with words. Instead of just saying stuff on the fly, he helps me to retract, to think through and process, because his words carry a lot of weight and power with them. And I want to be someone that's not just flippant. I want to be thought-provoking and thoughtful. And he's helped me to try to instill more of that in my own ministry. And I've also had leadership skills kind of burst in me since I was young, watching my dad do ministry. What he would do is around the dinner table, we had a very traditional family growing up. So we would eat dinner like every night at 5:30 or 6 o'clock. And my dad, he would tell us the things that happened in ministry to him at Life Challenge. And then he would ask me and Josh, what would we do to solve the issue or the thing that he went through? So that was really good because
cool.
We would be able to talk through like what my dad was doing, and then he would tell us what he did. And so, like he did tell us what he would do, but he wouldn't tell us before we had to think it through ourselves. So a lot of situations I've had to think through instead of just reacting and just handling it the way I feel. He's helped me to think through because ministry, I think it really is strategic, and a lot of it, I still stand behind it, like 50% or maybe even more is like doctrine and Bible and God and stuff. That's important. The other half or 40% of it is people skills. You got to be good with people, and you got to know how to deal with them. And so my dad and Pastor Cal has helped me to really evaluate my own, where I'm at with that, and how to become a better leader of people, because we're not just called to be shepherds of like preaching. A shepherd has to be with the people and to lead them from the ground up. So that's been really helpful for me.
Yeah, that's good. Over the years in the ministry, what was the hardest obstacle you had to overcome? How did you do so, and what did you learn from it?
The hardest obstacle I've had to overcome, since I've only been in ministry for about full-time for about 2.5 years, honestly the biggest difficulty or problem that I've had to work through, and I feel like I've come over onto the other side of it, is just being confident and okay with where I'm at and where I'm at in ministry. It is so easy, and I know you've probably heard it before, it is so easy to get caught up in numbers and to see numbers over faces. And we had talked about that, with Xerxes and the whole Esther, sermon series. And that hits home for me because it's difficult. It could be challenging at times for me in my first year or two to see what other people are doing and to see the ideas that they're doing, and we maybe not have those kind of resources to pull off something like that, or we don't have the number of people to pull off something like that, or we don't have the number of people showing up to justify doing something like that. And it could create feelings of jealousy and discontent that are not supposed to be there. And something that I had to work through, most in that first year was just being okay with knowing what I'm called to do. I'm not called to just be a number counter, like as people walk through the door and just like as they come through. I'm called to love people, and I don't see Jesus as the guy that was standing at the door, counting people as they came in to hear his parables. It's like, wow, I taught 5,000 people that parable. I'm going to see how many I can teach my next parable. I don't see that in his character. And that's something that I had to wrestle with. And even in the times, because we've had a few seasons where for like a month or two, it felt like we were stalling. We hit a plateau in terms of numerical growth. And then we were losing people, and I didn't know, I just feel like we're doing the same thing. I'm coming out with the same passion. And those things are going to happen in ministry. And while I've been through 2 of them, 2 years of stuff like that, and the Lord has blessed us with a season of growth right now. And that is such a blessing. I'm also not going to, go off my rocker if, some people stop showing up. I will pursue, and I will reach out, but I'm not going to apologize for doing what I'm called to do, and I'm not going to feel discontent with myself, or else I'm going to be awake every night thinking about it. So that's just something I have to be okay with.
Yeah, that's good. What is one thing that you know now that you wish you would have known when you started ministry?
I wish I would have known now. I wish my first couple of years, I guess really, yes, I've only been doing it for 2.5. I wish I would have had a better grasp of the divide that is necessary in Bible time. The time that I spend in the Word, I could easily justify my time in the Word at the beginning when I was studying it. That became a devotional life, so to speak. And that's not healthy. And while your sermons or your messages can be birthed out of your devotions, the flip side of that, if you are just looking to the Word of God for your messages instead of pulling apart from that and doing your own personal devotion, the Bible becomes your textbook instead of your life book. And that's really important to have that divide. And that's something that I was really convicted of, having to go through that and having those tough questions asked of me from leadership and from even family, to make sure that my love for the Word is not just my love for preaching the Word. I have to love the Word before I can have this love of preaching, or else it's just going to be shallow and I'm going to be frustrated when messages don't go the way I thought they should go. But if I love Jesus, I should love His Word, and then I should love to communicate it, and it should be in that order, instead of it being I love to preach, so I love the Word, and then I love Jesus, because that can flip, and that can be a ministry record for your own personal life. And so that's something I wish I would have known to save me some spiritual and personal frustration starting off ministry.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I've had to think about as well, because I spend so much time in schoolwork studying the Bible, and I'm well, I spent a lot of time studying the Bible today. And God's convicted me it's not the same thing.
Because that's what your professors you're needing or asking of you. It's different when you are doing it yourself. So for instance, Pastor Jimmy was really good at helping me think this through. When we serve, if you go into full-time ministry from 9 to 5, you got to think yeah, you are paid to do Wednesday night services, but don't forget that there are people who are working 9 to 5 and volunteering at the church the same time and not getting paid.
Yeah.
So, ministry is hard and ministry is time consuming, but that's the call. That if you're called to do it, you got to suck it up and you just got to learn and know that this is what I'm called to do. And it's going to require a lot of energy and sacrifice of me. But even like when you're studying the Bible, like for me, studying the Bible to preach, like that's part of my job. Separate from that, I'm required to go on my personal devos, because if I'm asking other people to do that, and that's my goal for United, I want people to fall in love with the Word. I have to make sure that I'm still in love with the Word.
Yeah.
So.
And then what has been the most rewarding part of being a leader in ministry?
The most rewarding part is to see things that you've planted finally come to fruition. The first 2 years have been a lot of planting, have been a lot of instilling, and while we had sort of this movement feel to it, there was so much momentum, people. I mean, we started with 8 people, and we started in a house, and gradually things kind of blew up, and that's really cool. But to see finally, after pouring and sowing into people, that transformation is taking place in their heart and in their head, where you do start to see people falling in love with the Word. And that was the goal from day one. Because I just knew that young adults don't go into the Bible and they don't go to church. And I can't get them to go to church if they don't love the Word. Mm-hmm. And so that was just a huge goal to try to get. And I'm seeing people enjoying reading the Bible and talking about it. That's why we do discussion groups. That's why when I preach, it's very story narrative like. It's not your 1, 2, 3 point life application on money or greed or envy. While there are times that I might go to that, I just know that what I'm doing is reaching a goal. And I'm trying to preach a narrative. I'm trying to preach the story of Jesus. And that story is really cool. And I want people to like that story. I want people to love that story and to mold their life around it. And because of that, I want people to come back to church and want to hear more about it. And because of that, I want them to be willing to share that story. That's a big thing. For me, that's been a really cool thing.
Cool, great.